Do you have a debt collector contacting you and asking you for way more money than you actually owe? Or worse yet, have you been sued by a debt collector and they're suing you for more money than you actually owe? In this video, we're going to talk about why that is and what you can do about it. My name is John Skiba, and I'm a consumer protection attorney in the state of Arizona. And if this is your first time on my YouTube channel, go ahead and click subscribe. Each week, I put out new videos that help you to deal with serious debt problems. In this video, I'm going to share with you a discussion that I had just recently with John Watts. John is a consumer protection attorney in the state of Alabama. He and I collaborate on different things quite often and talk about these kind of things, specifically debt collection lawsuits and ways to defend against them. So in this video, we're going to discuss the very issue of you've been sued by a debt collector, but they're asking for way more money than you actually owe. Check it out. Well, let's take a look at this question, which is kind of a debt collection and credit reporting. So someone on their credit report, it shows there's a debt for $1,050, but now they have a garnishment for $5,900. Why don't you take the first stab at that, and I'll give some of my thoughts as well.
Okay. Well, this is probably true of most states, but in Alabama, there is, you can be sued for a certain amount. Let's say it's $1,050, but then there's going to be court costs and attorney's fees added on top of that. And now they have this judgment. And as that judgment continues to progress through time, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger with what's called post-judgment interest, so judgment or interest after the judgment. And so, I mean, we've seen amounts be, many, many times the amount originally sued for. Now, it would be a little odd for that to happen just because of some timing situation. So negative credit reporting should only be on there about 7 years. And that's probably not enough time for this thing to grow to $5,900. So I'm not sure how the garnishment got that big. Maybe there was a lot of attorney's fees or something else, but Carly, if I was in your situation, it would be worth sending a letter to the credit bureaus and to whoever has that, whoever's doing the credit reporting, saying, I'm confused because, why are these different amounts? Now, if you think there's a chance that they're going to change your credit report to $5,900, then you may want to not say anything so that you don't have it higher. But you can always go to one side or the other, go to the lawyer with the judgment and say, how's this $5,900 if my credit report's only $1,050, or the opposite, and just try to get some clarity on that.
In Arizona, what we see the situation a lot because usually the judgments, particularly if they're a default judgment, and most, I believe the statistics are 94% nationwide of debt collection lawsuits end in a default judgment, which goes back to our prior answer. You got to do something. You got to respond to this if you get sued. But if there's a default judgment that's entered, often there's that contract rate of interest. So in Arizona, we'll see these default judgments that will have interest rates of 29%. And so they just churn interest. And in Arizona, it used to be that civil judgments were good for 5 years. Our state legislature, in their infinite wisdom, amended this, or and now they're good for 10 years. So, and then they can be renewed every 10 years for the rest of your life. And so it's not, uncommon. I'll see a judgment out there that's been churning interest at 29% for 8 years. And then they finally come in with a wage garnishment or a bank levy, something like that. So that's my guess as well. Is there's probably some interest, attorney's fees. A lot of the attorneys here will seek a post-judgment collection fees on top of it, and that whole thing can turn into just a giant nightmare. And that's why, again, it goes to the point that is so important. If you think you're being sued, or even if you're not being sued, if there's just an account out there, to reach out and do something and put some kind of plan together to deal with it, because these things can just turn into a nightmare. I talked to a guy a while back, and he told me a story about, he called it his $500, I think it was like a corn dog or something, where he went to a fair and he wrote a check. He was like 19 years old. He wrote a check for this corn dog, and the check bounced. And anyway, so they sent it to a collection agency. And when it was all said and done, with interest, with fees, with the court costs, the whole thing turned into a $500 debt that he ended up paying. Not saying that the process was followed correctly there, but it can become a huge issue. So the main thing there is to make sure that you're putting together a game plan.
Yeah, and John, if I can just say one more thing to Carly is, when we see these judgments get so big, and sometimes people are garnished and they're making payments in, and the judgment continues to grow, it may be that the interest is just so high that you're not making any progress. But sometimes these collection firms will really mess it up, and so it is worth looking at and trying to dig into it to say, okay, did they do the right interest rate? Did they apply the right fees and costs and expenses? Because most states have a provision where if there's a wrongful garnishment, in other words, a garnishment that is either in its entirety improper or in part improper, then you may have a claim back against that creditor. So, what you're describing here, it just looks wrong that there'd be that big of a discrepancy. So I would definitely look at that.